Okay, so we have a new episode of Legends and Leaders, and today it's great to have Adam here. Adam, you're the CEO of FundCanna, which has been instrumental in making sure this cannabis, the cannabis companies, the cannabis revolution is really taking off because of the funding you've been providing. And you have a lot of institutional understanding that you've been able to apply to this space while also being an entrepreneur, and that's helped make sure that the financial capital is there, but also that there's a lot of structuring that's done correctly for these companies. It's such a new industry, and so having your backing in there is incredibly helpful. So I'm excited to have you here and to get into your story.
Thanks, Ben. I appreciate it, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So Adam, how did your interest in this category even begin? What led to you thinking, "Hey, I can help build companies in this space, and I can be involved in companies at the ground level, and make them scale."
So first, I'll tell you, the I've been around cannabis my whole life. My dad smoked a lot of weed growing up, and so to me, it was normal. Like he never hid it. So it was something that never carried that vice label. In our house, it was just a thing, and
Mm,
so it wasn't a big part of life. It just was normal.
yeah.
Now, having said that, I'll give you how I never imagined being in the space. I just never viewed cannabis or the plant as anything abnormal.
Mm,
But my journey has been manufacturing, sales, and finance, um, which interestingly, they apply to everything, cannabis included. Uh, I worked for a while. I'm from New York City originally, and I worked for a while in apparel where everything gets factored. And so that was my introduction to using other people's money to fulfill orders, to manufacture, to carry costs. And I did that for a while, but in the interest of time, we'll skip over that. And then I worked on Wall Street trading equities, and from that, really, it was about analytics. I love analytics. I love data. I love numbers, and so that aspect of trading was fun. And then about 22, 23 years ago, I got into lending, and
mm,
at first, it was consumer lending, student loans, and so in student loans. Did about 14.5 billion, which is crazy to say out loud, but you learn a lot by doing that kind of volume. And you work with regulators, and you work with banks, and you deal with a highly regulated, with a lot of legislation industry, and you understand from A to Z how you can navigate and move while still, most importantly, servicing your customer, your borrower. Um, that during the financial crisis led me to small business lending because after funding nearly 15 billion, I found banks went dark. And if they were going dark for me, what was that journey like for a small business operator? And what I learned was even during great economic times, small businesses are underserved by banks. They have no problem on the deposit side, but on the lending side, they decline 75 to 80% of their depositors. So I started a small business lender behind this student loan company, and then separated them and left student loans. And I ran that for 14 years. We underwrote 1 million small businesses and funded 3.5 billion on balance sheet. Um, and then during COVID, I saw cannabis was deemed essential. And I was fascinated by that because all of my traditional small business clients were forced to close.
mm,
I was forced to close. I had 250 employees. No one was allowed to come to the office. But here I am sitting on my couch, told that if I leave my house, I'm going to get a ticket. And people are at dispensaries wearing masks, but shopping for cannabis, which is federally illegal. And so I was fascinated by this dichotomy of traditional business being closed down and cannabis being deemed essential, which led me, as a guy that loves to learn and understand things, it led me pretty deep down the rabbit hole of wanting to understand how the cannabis industry worked, how it was funded and financed. And I learned a ton about the pain points, which ultimately led me to start FundCanna. Hopefully, that wasn't too long of a story, Ben.
No, that's great, Adam. Just when you were starting this company up, I mean, you mentioned there was issues, for other companies to get funding in the space. How did you think you were going to navigate that, and even get the backing maybe of people you needed to have funds to be able to give to companies and just set up an institution like this?
Sure. It's a great question. So, very difficult. It's always difficult, though, to raise money for an idea, regardless of industry, right?
Yeah,
If you're speaking to me on the side of just being an entrepreneur, everything is hard. That's just the reality. It's all hard.
yeah,
But it doesn't mean it can't be done. It's hard. And there are days where it's too hard, and then there are days where it's just hard enough. Um, but it's always hard. And that, by the way, continues to this day. The journey isn't easy, but that doesn't mean it's not rewarding. Now, if I go back to your question, um, thankfully I had a track record at that point, right? I had
right.
done student loans at scale, I had done SMB lending at scale, and now this was the third time, granted, different category, tricky category, a vice category in the eyes of investors. But I had a great network of friends, one in particular that became my equity partner, silent, non operating. But he helped me go to a group of our mutual friends and raise the seed money to just prove the concept. Now, that's
Mhm.
the way I've always done it, Ben. When you start a new lender, banks are not going to want to give you money out of the gate. They want to at least see you cycle money through, demonstrate your ability to assess credit risk, service those assets, collect on those assets. And you want some cycles of that before you can go, regardless of category, before you can go out and just raise institutional capital. It's different if it's a non-lending business. You can go out and raise seed money or equity money, and then follow that up with debt. But in a lending business, they want to show acumen. You want to show your acumen and your track record. So I was able to raise money from friends, raise some equity and some debt, and I've stated it before. I'll say it here. I raised 5 million of equity and I raised 25 million of debt. I don't want to make it sound like that's not a lot of money. It's a ton of money. It's not easy to do, uh, but trading on the history and those relationships, I was able to do it. Um, and that got us to the place where we could prove our model. And now we're actually in market now, raising institutional capital, and it's still difficult because of cannabis, but there's a level of receptivity that I don't think would have existed if we didn't demonstrate that 3.5, nearly 4 years of successful deployment, collection, and repeat business, meaning it's working for our clients, not just for us. We can demonstrate all of that to institutions, and therefore they're a bit more receptive.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I appreciate the transparency around that. When you were looking at just funding deals and I mean, you had to probably build out like some sort of model to look at deals and what you would back. And yeah, I mean, this is an area that has had some pretty interesting players in it. Some of them that have not, turned out quite well, but there've also been some great successes. But I think maybe there's a higher like risk threshold. How do you just evaluate deals? How do you figure out what to back and what not to back?
And I appreciate that, but just the awareness that it's different. Um,
Yeah.
so you basically, for me, what I did was take everything I knew, and tried to kind of work in reverse to see if it was applicable. And I've always been surrounded by very smart people. In most cases, smarter than I am. Certainly better than I am at what they do. And Um, but still, it's kind of after, it's been a while, right? I mean, the gray beard and hair are indicative not only of the many years, but of all the things I've gotten wrong through those years. So you take all of that and you apply it, but you have to be open minded enough to see, is it applicable? And in many cases it wasn't. And then it's like, okay, why not? And what can stand in to replace it? So basically what I'd say is my handbook from my prior lending became almost an addendum to a new handbook that had to be written because of cannabis, but I still was able to call on that addendum. um, and then we limped in, right? Like our first month of funding, we funded 3 clients. It wasn't like we came out sprinting.
Mhm.
And I look, I hate the use of like overused sayings or cliches like crawl, walk, run, but they exist for a reason. It's valid, and so that's what we did. We crawled so that when we got kicked, we didn't have far to fall.
Mhm.
Uh, and there was a lot to learn, and it is not a one-to-one transfer. You have to start to understand and really study supply chain dynamics within cannabis, grow
Yeah.
cycles and inputs for the grow, top of the supply chain. So from cultivation down to dispensary and everything in between, I really had to, and the team here had to understand, what does each vertical do? What are their timelines? What are their pain points? And what are the kinks in the hose for each of those verticals? And how might capital kind of dekink or unkink that hose? And then how do you size appropriately? And so it's kind of like reverse engineering, but with the intent of helping the client. And if you do that, it'll work for the client. If it works for them, and you don't over lever, it ends up working for us too. So I don't know
Mhm.
if that's a roundabout answer. Hopefully, I'm
I
addressing the
get it.
question.
Yeah. Why did you decide to go the lending route and not just like become like a typical VC, just take equity stakes, or maybe you do a combination of both, but why prioritize lending specifically?
Yeah. So I we don't take equity, and we did make one equity investment, but not in someone that we lent to, and not in a plant touching entity. It's a financial institution that services the space. But that was early, and it was strategic, and not something that we focus on. And having said that, why debt? It's what I know, and
Right.
and I have a track record of doing it pretty well. I'm not going to say I'm the best ever at anything, um, but I know how to do that well, and I'm always looking to learn and grow. And so I'd rather continue to hone and refine that skill that I've been building on than pivot and just instantly go. It's a new industry for me. And I didn't want to also, and I've done that before. I've made the leap from consumer lending to commercial lending. And I put the effort and the time in. To me, this was another pivot on a path that I was already on. If I were to become a VC or an equity investor, that's a significantly larger pivot. It's almost like an abandonment of a model, and I think all too often entrepreneurs get themselves in trouble by like believing their own hype. I would tell you, I'm inherently an anxious guy, and I'm always worried about what could go wrong. In fact, I obsess over that to the
Right.
point that I'm like a nervous wreck. Right? I don't show it, Ben, but on the
Yeah.
inside, it's chaos. On the outside, it's relatively calm. Um, but I don't know that I had the confidence to believe that I can do anything. I've demonstrated to myself that I can do this. And if there's an opportunity to do this, why not further develop the skill that I've been working on for 20 plus years instead of
Mhm.
jumping in a new thing and believing that I can
Yeah.
be good at anything?
Just based on the companies you've surveyed and what you're backing, like, I mean, what do you think? Where do you think the trends are going? Like, what will be the biggest innovations that you see coming in cannabis?
Well, look, I think we've underwritten over 5,000 transactions. We've funded over 3,500 of those. And the what I can't tell you the future. It's just the skills that I have. One of them is not reading crystal balls. Uh,
Oh shoot.
yeah, I'm working on it. But what I'll tell you, what I see right now is hemp and beverage
Yeah.
is growing in almost every wherever you look. It's really promising. Now, the issue with hemp and beverage um, is this similar in that no one knows how to regulate this, and currently it operates within the loophole of the 2018 Farm Bill, and there are lawmakers that are trying to close that loophole. Now, I believe there's a future for intoxicating beverage, regardless of what happens. But the path from where we are today to where it ends up, the path is uncertain, but I have no doubt in the category. I think the category is going to be enormous. I'm a huge believer, and there's some phenomenal companies that already exist in the category, and so I think the path is uncertain, but there's no doubt that it ends up being just monstrous. So the
Mhm.
existing legal cannabis market is about 35 billion, absent hemp. Um, and the beverage market, I think, will be at least that in very short order. Um, but every state is trying to do something different, and the Fed doesn't know what to do with hemp either. And so it's like this political hot potato. Not quite the same way cannabis is, but nonetheless, it has a lot to contend with. So, but I don't think the future is uncertain. I just think the path to the future is uncertain.
Mhm.
I don't know. Are we going left? Are we going right? Are we going straight through? I have no idea. There are going to be hiccups. There may be states that ban in the process, but it will not be permanent. I think it's with cannabis and with beverage, the cat's out of the bag. The voters have spoken. 88% of the voting public wants cannabis to be legal. Um, and that's not like a random stat. Like we're talking like Gallup, Pew Research, reliable, respected bodies that do research tell you nearly all legal age voting public, they want this, and the sales numbers show it too. Until the Fed and the states begin to align and there's a little bit more direction, things will be somewhat chaotic. Um, but it's the industry's not going away, and these categories will continue to grow.
Mhm. I mean, when you look at like just the way that the industry's changed over time, I think one of the biggest changes, I mean, obviously legalization has been pretty significant and there's more to go, but I think one of the biggest changes has been in the way it's grown and the technology behind that. Are you finding that there's a lot of companies that are coming to you for funding around that specifically, and just new innovations around actually creating cannabis itself and growing it? Because I think that there's a lot of opportunities around that.
So that's a difficult question to answer directly, only because I don't know how you categorize evolution or
Yeah,
technology. Because there's tech in lighting, there's tech in nutrient,
yeah,
there's tech in delivery of those things. And so, from a cultivation standpoint, there's a ton of technology at play. And like lighting and nutrients have existed forever, but the technology around like wavelengths and LED
yeah.
and when the lights are on versus when they're off and how you shock plants, all of these things will continue to evolve. There's no doubt. And the efficiency that comes from that, not only in the output of the volume of growth, but even in the usage of utility and the expense to grow a flower, um, all of that technology makes things more efficient. And so it warrants investment. So in that regard, something like lighting, yes, we work with lighting vendors and we work with cultivators to purchase lighting. And so people do come to us for that. Same on the nutrient side, and some of even the delivery mechanisms, like automation around delivery of nutrients. And then there's point of sale systems and inventory tracking, and we finance all those things. but we also finance day-to-day operations. So we have clients that will use us for one or the other, and then they end up coming back to expand and thus use lighting and nutrient delivery and HVAC and the like. Um, but there is a fair bit, and you've got also not only an inventory management, but you've got seed to sale technology, and then there are data platforms that help you understand what to buy, when to buy it, um, and people are slow to adapt that technology, first because of the cost, and second because they're struggling just running the business. The
Right.
last thing they want to do is further complicate or relinquish the process that feels to be working and trust new tech. But it's coming. It will happen, and it needs to be accepted. I understand some of the hesitancy around wide adoption of all technology, but there's no doubt it's there, and yes, we do see it.
Adam, just the last question I have, like, what do you aspire to do now? What are your biggest goals you're focused on for the company, for you as a business leader, just in general?
Yeah, so that's probably the hardest question you've asked so far, but because I think that's always evolving.
Yeah.
Every day I feel a little bit different. But if I'm trying to think about where I am today and where I aspire to go, I think the opportunity to support this industry is enormous. I want to maintain. We're the market leader now for non-real estate financing for this space. I want to maintain that position. I want to see this industry become more widely accepted at a legal level, um, and I'd like to continue the path or the trajectory we're on of supporting the space. We've also launched some new technology of our own, product called ReadyPaid, and that product resides between buyers and sellers and has an automated assessment of credit facility or sizing so that we can assist buyers in their purchasing and give them elongated terms. We can pay sellers and eradicate the AR or accounts receivable issue that this industry is dealing with. So I'd like to see in the near term wide adoption of the ReadyPaid product, and support the industry in that way. Long term, I want to be thought of as the trusted and reputable partner to the cannabis industry when it comes to financing or funding solutions of any kind. And so we're wholly focused on that, but through every avenue where we can be of help.
Well, Adam, thanks for coming on and doing this. I think it's great what you've built and that you've given so many of these companies a chance to get off the ground without the funding resources that you've provided to them. I don't know how they would have done that. And I think there's a lot more you're going to do. So I'm excited to see what's to come and appreciate you taking the time and sharing what you're up to.
Thanks, Ben. I appreciate the conversation.